So legal isn't the department of no, it's the department of how. That's how I think about it. Like that's how do we get this done? How do I achieve the goal of the company? And that's how I think of like reframing the traditional understanding of kind of legal function from people who may be skeptics.
Welcome back to CZ and Friends, where we talk with legal leaders, technologists, and operators building the future of business and law. I'm your host, Cecilia Zadidi. Today, I'm joined by David Morris. He's a general counsel who knows what it takes to lead through IPOs, global expansion, and major business shifts. At TripAdvisor, David played a key role in taking the company public, opening new markets, including Cuba, and advocating before Congress and EU regulators. Later, he built Vivid Seats' his legal team from the ground up, guiding the company through a $2 billion deSPAC transaction during COVID. Along the way, David has rebuilt legal organizations, including full-scale at security company Snyk. He's done cross-border deals, and he's championed what he calls a legal as a product mindset we're going to dig into, and really thinking about how legal can actually drive impact and be a force multiplier. I met David at a Tech GC event some years ago, and we've been friends ever since. In this episode, we'll dig into David's playbook for building high-impact teams, how his product-driven approach reshapes the GC role, and what he's learned leading through hyper-growth and high-stakes moments. David, welcome to the show.
Julia, thank you. I'm really I'm thrilled to be here, and it's great to catch up.
All right, let's dive in. So, David, you've said before you see the general counsel role as more than managing risk. It's really about being a business architect. What does that mean?
So I think of it as legal isn't the enemy of innovation. I feel like that's sort of a reputation that legal departments get, like the business of no. That comes from unclear ownership and unclear directive. And who are you hiring ultimately, right? And what's your mandate? Do you have the buy-in of leaders of the organization to actually be a business partner? Are you bringing people onto your team who have that commercial, get stuff done, politely said, mindset? And I think there's a lot of law departments that have people who like see things in a very linear job. I look at this contract, I must remove risk, right? And that isn't necessarily one way to look at it. I think the better way is to kind of really think about what risk is and what's your organization's appetite for risk. Do you have the right lawyers who are level setting to it and understand you have to be really careful when you are saying no to someone in a certain way, right? What are you saying? Hey, we could do it differently, right? Here's another way to think about this. What is the ultimate business and commercial goal that the business in that moment is trying to get at? And do your lawyers understand it? Because a lot of times they're just, they have 100 things coming at them from different angles. I've got an HR issue in this country. I have the 10 commercial contracts here. I've got a product question. And they're just trying to get stuff off the list, but not understanding the larger picture as to what's happening in the organization. And some of that comes back to the person sitting in the GC or CLO seat, right? Are they giving the lawyers the full context as to what the business is doing? Do they know their role in this? And I find that a lot of the time, unless you explicitly lay these things out, the team doesn't necessarily understand that. It takes extra effort and intentionality to do that. Other challenge of the GC role is you want to, speaking for myself, I'd like to be transparent, right, as much as I can be. By the nature of this role and the things that you do, that isn't always possible 100% of the time to give all of the information. So I think the motto is be as transparent as you can be with your team to give them the big picture, level set for them and have them operate in that picture. And that produces better results for the lawyers and critically makes them much happier at their jobs, right? That creates additional retention for the company because they feel like they are part of it. They are not just there clocking in and clocking out, so to speak. And I found like in terms of keeping people on my team happy and engaged, that's been a huge win.
So one of the guests last week mentioned that in some legal departments, you're kind of clean up on aisle 9, sort of like, we did this, fix it. I guess a New Yorker cartoon that's got, a long document and somebody's like, hey, go run this up legal's, rear. That's not what you're talking about. So show me, like, how is that different day to day? So I'm a corporate counsel on your team. How do I experience the act of being in your team with that
So
background?
I think a big piece of it is how do you get yourself in the right meetings, right? Are you there just to be responsive when someone says, I have a problem? I think that's part of all of our jobs. Like, I'm not going to tell people like that's not. It is for sure, but it can't be all of it, right? What I push my teams for is, are you in the meetings with the business groups you support, right? And sometimes the answer is, oh yeah, I am. And then I press. I'm like, tell me what meetings. What's the cadence of them? And when you ask those questions, the answer tends to be, well, we meet quarterly about this. Like, okay, so you're not in the meetings. Like, you're in a quarterly recap meeting and you're finding out things long after the fact, unless it was a crisis. What about their weekly team meetings? Are you there? Do you know how to get yourself into that room, the room where it happens, so to speak, to kind of steal that line? Are you in those meetings, and have you earned that seat at the table by giving feedback, but knowing to make sure you're not overstepping, right? If you can get yourself into those meetings, you understand strategically what's happening for the folks you are supporting, but really your role there is in those meetings is to listen. And obviously if something's going really far afield, yeah, you're there to course correct and catch those things. But I found that was some of the biggest learnings, and what I talk to the people on my team about is, are you getting yourself in those meetings? Are you building deep relationships with the customers you're supporting? If you're supporting a sales team and they have their sales kickoff that a lot of B2B SaaS companies have, are you going out with them after 8 o'clock at night? Honestly, I'm telling you, is it part of the job? No. Should you? Hell yeah. You should be doing that. It's once or twice a year. It's not a hard thing to do. They need to know you and trust you. And that is part of it, especially in a world that is, well, I mean, I would say increasingly remote. It was getting very remote and now it's getting less remote, but there's certainly still that element in a lot of tech companies, certainly. And certainly all the ones that I've worked for, there's still a significant element of that where it's that much more critical when you're not seeing people every day.
So, as someone on your team, I hear you tell me, hey, Cecilia, get in these meetings. And then you're like, all right, add value. What am I like, let's get real tactical for a second. Like, what am I doing? What am I saying? Like, let's just say it's a new product launch meeting. I'm product counsel on David's team. You're giving me a pep talk before I head in. What am I doing?
So I think you're going in there. I said the first thing you're doing is listening and understanding, right? Figuring out who are the key players that are making the decisions in this meeting. What's the role of everyone there? A lot of this is really EQ stuff and not lawyer stuff, right? And you'd almost expect this from your product folks, your engineering folks, folks in different business groups. So are you doing that for legal and doing your issue spotting, right? I thought the most common things I hear about often tie to privacy and data security type of questions, and then international legal nuances if you're launching products that people are thinking with often a US or a UK lens. And like, well, what about mainland Europe on the privacy front? Have we thought about these different laws in different countries? If they even know about them, right? And so I'd say answer is be cautious, start by listening. And if you see, if you see something that is just, there's no way the company can launch this product, yeah, there's a time and a place to step in on that one. Honestly, most of the time, it's much more subtle and more iterative than that, and you don't have to, but you find a way to kind of add small bits of value as you go without interrupting the flow of those meetings. And then the business views those lawyers as like Jenny, she's part of the team, right? That's where you want to get to. I found when we start this process at certainly my last two companies, it often was me having to go knock on the door and say, hey, I really need John and Jenny to join for this group and for this group. And usually if it's the GC asking the question and and giving proper context and making clear, this is not a threat to your innovative spirit. We're not going to go cut you off. The answer is usually yes. Oftentimes, if they come in, it may or may not, depending on the culture of the company, it can be a shock to the system, honestly. A lot of companies aren't used to that approach. I think, forward-leaning software companies, a little more so, a little more used to it. But there definitely is a lot of effort and if you're early days GC, some political capital that needs to be used to open those doors.
I love that advice. I mean, I remember one of my proudest moments as product counsel was when they invited me to basically their fun offsite. And we did one of those like fake, the fake skydiving where you're in like a fan. But the point of it was like part of the team. And I think for me, a big thing, everybody talks about Department of No. There was this funny meme that was like, we're not the Department of No, we're the Department of I told you so. Yeah, no, that's not good. But I guess like this yes and is there something where it's like, is that just experience of like, okay, we've launched this relatively aggressive product, we're using data in a certain way, but we've been very careful to use experience. We wrote great things. We looked up 50 states of privacy laws, like what is, when you say political capital, how do you build it to get to that point to be part of the team?
So it's a great question. And it's hard, right? It's finding some early wins for the teams you work with that you have added value, whether it was closing a deal, supporting on a product effort, making something go smoothly for them. Whatever that early, and it can be so many different things depending on what you do for the company. When you kind of demonstrate a couple of wins for the team and that you're there to be part of it, and then they understand you're not there to check boxes, right? You're there to get the product launched like they are, right? Obviously, to do it in a legally compliant way, yes, 100%. When they understand that, it becomes very easy. But in the beginning, yeah, there's some political capital because you probably have to push a little bit, right? And it often means escalating to the GC, the head of product, whoever it might be in that particular scenario to say, hey, I really like to be part of this. And here's why. And don't worry, we're not going to do anything that is going to change your process, right? People are always afraid of that. Like, is it going to be stifling? Are people going to be willing to speak their minds? So those are the concerns that I've heard multiple times that you have to kind of set at ease up front. And that usually then opens the door. And to your point, when have you like made it in this respect? When you're invited to the faux skydiving offsite, you're in. And so I've seen that happen. Both my last two companies where like the lawyers who supported product and engineering and like a couple other functions were never invited. In fact, didn't know when those offsites were happening. And a couple months ago, I kind of got a note from someone on my team saying, oh, hey, is it okay if I'm coming up to HQ next week? I was invited to the R&D offsite. And I was like, that's like, yes, 1,000
Like, give me
times
the
yes.
chills. I'm so proud of that
I don't even know what
person.
you're doing. I don't know like whatever you're accomplishing, the answer is yes. You have to be there for that. That's great. And hopefully there'll be good, effective time spent in addition to whatever you're doing at night. Diving, whatever,
I mean,
foosball, whatever it might be.
oh, and this is the thing too, that I think about the impact of AI on this, where just like, go run this up legal's rear. You can do that with AI, but you can't do the skydiving where somebody's like, hey, we're thinking of launching XYZ new product. Or, hey, our big priority at the time I supported Alexa. And it was like to entertain, apply, and manage the home. And it was like, okay, we've got a bunch of different vectors to think about this. It's a holistic product. Like I believe that after I kind of combed my hair after the faux skydiving, I believe I actually was quite a bit of a better lawyer from that point. So I guess so we've got this like very graphical example of going to the offsite. Any particular, I know obviously, things aren't public, but any examples stand out in your career of just some amazing in-house lawyering that you did? Obviously, I'm seeing Cuba and I'm thinking, okay, let's go have some Cubanos or something. But
I mean,
what's
this is far.
any example like really jump out at you of like, okay, that was an example of like I was truly part of the team and kind of reached that pinnacle moment?
Yeah, I mean, that's one that, it's 10 years ago, so I can talk about it now, right? It's nice that when
Sure.
you get far enough away, and even though I'm dating myself. So I had a question come in from our product and engineering team, product and sales teams, like, hey, want to go sell travel into Cuba. And it was one of the very rare times where I had to say, hey, sorry, we actually can't do that right now because I don't want to go spend time with you in a jumpsuit in prison, right? Like, I'm not sure I look good in orange and white. Probably not. My complexion, not really a great match. And it's one of the times where like, there's actually kind of a binary answer to this question. And it's, most risks when you think about it are really boiled down to financial and reputational risk. And ultimately, these can be escalated or turned into business risks. And the question is like, well, do we want to take this on, right? What's the magnitude of this risk if something goes wrong? And what's the likelihood of this going wrong? And we're going to go make a call. And that's how it's going to go. And that'll be escalated to the right people on the business and legal sides. This was a different one. When you're talking about jail, you're talking about something very, very different. But what we did was say, hey, we can't do this right now, right? Today, there's no way to do this. So what did we do? We kicked off a kind of government affairs. We had a very nascent government affairs practice that I was asked to start up. Did I know anything about government affairs before this? Not really. No, I'm a commercial and corporate lawyer by trade, but you learn these things as you go. And we went and had discussions with the government at the time. And after traveling to Cuba and getting to experience the culture there and talk to folks in the government in Cuba as well, we're able to, a year later, get a license to sell travel into Cuba. So TripAdvisor and Airbnb were doing that when that was permissible for a period of time under a prior administration. And that was amazing. It was such a win to know that this was something that was a hard no. It was one of the very few things that was a really hard no. And we turned this into a yes. And people immediately understood. When they hear jail, people get it right away, right? Like usually, listen, you're selling software. The risks really are usually financial reputation. It really isn't life or death or prison. It's just, that's not usually what you're looking at. And that was really unique and special to able to take something that was such a hard no and turn it into a win. And the business really understood that and really appreciated that. And that to me was a super special moment to kind of, you get that license, you're like, wow, this is on the site now. People are going and when they could, traveling to Cuba.
Well, and customers and the impact. I mean, there's so many threads to pull here of like being there. So physically going to Cuba, meeting with the regulators, not the sort of like ask for forgiveness. It was permission, but permission with, some incentives and with, a real product to offer. I love that story.
And it's a balance because that's the permission approach, right? There's always, you said, ask for forgiveness versus permission. That's a dialogue. And that's one of the things for the younger lawyers to understand too, is I think sometimes they err so much towards, can't do it. We can't do it. Well, the business hears that. What is it we can't do? Why can't we do it? Can we do it if we want to take on this risk? Is it just financial risk? Who should be making that decision? And that's where they need to be kind of taught, like, hey, we have to be really nuanced and careful in what we say to the business folks, because they will take it and they may not fully understand it, or it may get spun a different way. You send a Slack, it's always Slack, without context, and that gets spun 14 ways, forwarded on, and then the Slack gets forwarded back to the GC. You're like, hey, Bob said this. And you're like, oh boy, okay, let's go unpack this whole thing, explain and contextualize, and then you've spun a cycle and lost half a day contextualizing and fixing something. And
yeah, I had the exact. Oh, go ahead, sir.
No, and like, so that's hard. And that balance of forgiveness and permission. The flip side is short-term rentals. Like that was obviously with Airbnb is the big name there. Uber, if you're on that side of things, if you had just said, hey, we can't do this, you need a taxi medallion in New York City or San Francisco, someone else is going to do it. It's going to happen, right? Ultimately, sometimes the laws are so far behind the reality and the pace of innovation that you're going to take an educated risk and say to the business, like, hey, here is the risk. Here's how it can go down. Here's what might happen. Maybe we should try to do this anyway and go in eyes wide open, right? That's a business judgment. It's not criminal, right? It's just, again, these are financial and reputational issues, but you have to take some businesses, you take that approach. Airbnb absolutely took that approach, and you can see where they are now. Does that apply to everyone and every vertical? No, that doesn't work in cybersecurity. Like, just doesn't, right? But when you're talking about travel, yeah, that can work. And I mean, so you saw the Uber Airbnb playbook, and for certain verticals, that will be approach you could take in some measure of moderation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Airbnb example is absolutely brilliant, because the other thing that they had was really that customer obsession, right? Of like, it is great to be able to pull up your app and be able to call an Uber or be able to stay. Airbnb put out this stat, interestingly, something to the effect that in Italy, most hotels are sort of in cities, and there's all these beautiful villages that don't have, a Hilton or what have you, but you can get coverage, and I think it's like 98% of Italy through Airbnb. It's these beautiful use cases of like widows making extra money from, their wine cellar or things like that. And that is something that, to your point, was through government affairs, where it was like, yes, and okay, you know what, we're going to have to get a city by city, fight in their case to get these permits. But meanwhile, we're going to be making widows' lives better. We're going to be making tourism better. We're going to be bringing money. We're going to have this offering. And I mean, I early Airbnb, I super admire on the legal side. Belinda Johnson eventually became
Yeah,
COO. I
she's great.
worked with her at Yahoo and just absolutely really a great example of legal as the business driver. So like for me, I guess I'm a sucker for pain with like the regulated industries. So say more on that. So you've worked in different industries, obviously travel, security now. Security, I would say privacy, I would call it heavily regulated at this point. Anything that our listeners should know about kind of working in regulated industry versus not and just advice on lawyering?
I mean, so in my research, so online travel, secondary market ticketing, and cybersecurity, so all different in their own way. I'm not sure I'd categorize any of them as heavily regulated. When I think of heavily regulated, I think of banks, I think of healthcare, where the risks are just different, right? They're just much more material when you're holding someone's life savings and someone's all of your health information versus, well, if someone's going on a trip, they're buying tickets to go see Coldplay, whatever.
Coldplay.
I was at that concert, by the way. That
Were
was
you really in
completely insane.
Boston? Look at that.
That
I've
was
heard
completely insane. Like, and no one knew who that
I
was
mean,
in that moment, by the way.
yeah, and
But
I mean, now we've all talked about the astronomer
yeah,
company, so we'll publish, we don't I
yeah,
don't think we need a show notes for that one, but yeah,
no,
so you were at Coldplay with tickets purchased from Vivid Seats. Yeah, okay, so it's not highly regulated. I guess
it's
it's just
not
has
highly regulated.
regulated regime.
But
Okay.
but I think the part of the lesson is, I think 10, 20, I mean 15, 20 years ago, smaller companies didn't appreciate the need for government and regulatory engagement. They kind of said, hey, we'll mind our business, run our business, try to not break any laws, and it's all fine. We don't need to spend money on any of this stuff. And I think there's been a come to Jesus moment from a lot of companies of saying, government's going to regulate you anyway. Government is now a lot less predictable than it was 10 years ago. It's just sort of a reality, whether one likes it or not. And so you can't just put your head in the sand and kind of figure, well, we're small, we're a $100 million SaaS company. There's no overlays into this. There is. It's there. I was fortunate enough in my career, when I was TripAdvisor especially, to kind of help start a government affairs function and then hand it off to a real, actual government affairs professional. But when you spend a decade, seem like every month going back and forth to DC or elsewhere, you kind of learn your way around and you understand these cycle times to get things done are so much longer than what lawyers understand. If you're a litigator, maybe you may have a little more patience. You're used to litigation that can last a year. But if you're a deal lawyer, if you're someone who came up like I did on A or commercial transactions where these things usually happen in a cycle of months, if it's a commercial transaction, it could be weeks, big deal could be a year. You're not looking at 2, 3, 4 year cycles to get either laws passed or regulatory clarification from an agency on a particular topic. And that comes somewhat as a shock to the system. And it's an especially big shock to the system to your CEO and CFO and your leadership team. They will go, oh, well, we can get this clarified, right? You can take care of that next month, right? And the answer is no, you can't do that. You could send people down there. You could hire the best lobbyists. That simply isn't the nature of the cycles that occur in government. And I'm not sure if those cycles are even longer now or shorter, but I think the need for that regulatory and government affairs engagement is absolutely critical, especially in the time we're living in right now. And that's not just in the United States, it's elsewhere too. It's sort of chaos in a lot of different places. And that was kind of something I want people to take away is that this is a different time. And even before the last election, if you're not engaging, your ability, your value as GC is willing to see it, look around corners, right? Like, yeah, I love sports analogies. So like, yes, can I call balls and strikes? I can go all day with sports analogies, but like, sure, I can call balls and strikes, play Monday morning quarterback. We can go on and on with these. You need to see around the corner. And if you don't know what's happening at the agencies, potentially in Congress, is there something that's going to affect your industry and your company, which for my business, for the last couple of companies, it has, then you're flying blind and you can't give the best advice to your leadership team, your board, your product managers for that. And I think it's really underrated, even though it is frustrating because it's hard to get these defined wins in the period of time that technology businesses operate at. They are completely opposite in how those things operate.
It's interesting. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the sports analogies. I'm a food analogy person, so the one that was just screaming at me in your as you made that point is like the if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, right? So this
Mm,
idea that like Andreessen Horowitz and others have this whole like small tech thing, and particularly with AI, right? Like, so we've seen lots of wins for smaller companies in AI. We've seen companies hitting revenue levels they haven't ever hit before. So I think from a government standpoint, like, so what are the, so I'm a new GC, let's say similar position to you, 100 million revenue, product that's got some interest. Maybe it's in AI. What am I doing to set up my government affairs program? Do I start with meetings? Do I start with PR? Just tactical things.
I think the first thing you're doing is, frankly, it's probably figuring out, it probably starts with a meeting of figure out who are the right stakeholders in DC that are influencing your agenda. And this could be Brussels too, for that matter. Like, who are those right stakeholders that from a agency perspective or from a congressional perspective, you get to the executive branch, I think later, a little bit after that, that can influence what you're doing, who are making these rules, and are the people who are making the rules right now, are the rules that being discussed gonna hit you harder? Because you also have to accept that big tech is spending a lot more money than small tech is. And I'm going to define big tech as companies over $75 billion, right? So and that's not, so that's that Mag 7. No, I'm stepping down from Mag 7 by certainly by a level here. But there's a lot of companies that are that level of magnitude. They're spending a lot of money there that have in-house government affairs, an array of lobbyists, and they know everything that's coming. And they probably have touch points into potential bills or regulatory discussions that are intended, as you would expect, to put a favorable light on the plans of their company. And if you're at a much smaller competitor, there's a good chance they're going to try to put things in there that are going to be easier for them to comply with and onerous on smaller companies and smaller platforms. That is how that simply tends to work. That's sort of been Google's playbook among a whole bunch of other companies, Google, Meta, et cetera. And listen, there's a lot of really smart people, and the revolving door between government and big tech since the Obama administration is pretty, it's extensive is the way to put it. So I think you're exactly, if you don't know if you know what's on the menu, it might be you, right? It might be and so you can't spend in the way they can, right? You don't have the same resources. We all understand that. But is it worth that resource to have a lobbyist to tell you at least what is going on the ground here? What do I need to be aware of? And then, hey, we're small, we're scrappy. We can go figure out what it is we need to do about it internally. Does that require anything on the product side or whatever it might, or strategy side broadly? And do we need this lobbyist to go actually engage more formally? Do we need to, grassroots boots on the ground? What do we need here to do something about it? But these things can affect really the financial health and, plans of your company. And, it's for young, smaller company leadership to process that this really can have an impact on them until it's already happening and it's too late.
No, I pulled some quick stats while you were speaking. Meta employed 65 lobbyists in 2024. That's one for every 8 members of Congress, which is amazing.
Even more than I would have thought. And I think the hard thing is, right, you think of yourself as a GC, like, hey, I'm here to be a builder, not a bureaucrat, right? So that dichotomy is what we're talking about, is like, tech company, we're builders. DC, Brussels, they're bureaucrats. So you have to bridge that. You have to. Take the builder mentality with you, but you have to. You can't not engage with them because it's not comfortable or it's not how your CEO or CFO or leaders want to spend their time. They don't need to be spending a lot of their time on this. They do need to be aware of it. And trust me, your board is going to be interested and ask about these things.
I have definitely seen that. I mean, I think it's also this idea that, as lawyers and in-house lawyers in particular, we definitely play that translation function, right? So for me, I went to Georgetown undergrad. Every second roommate of mine is a lawyer. It's a whole thing. But that ability to take that tech immersion, all the faux skydiving trips, and then speak to the DC folks and the Beltway and the pantyhose and the, wingtip shoes and all that, and get there. So any funny stories, anything interesting? You have some, looks like you went to Singapore, you've done this all over the world. Any kind of GA efforts stand out in particular that you can talk about? Obviously there was the Cuba one we discussed, but anything else?
The Cuba one is the one that really sticks out for me. But I think I'd say in terms of the only I say to kind of the lawyers on my team and the folks I've mentored is, don't get too pigeonholed, right? I think it's easy early in a career, especially if you're a law firm, all right, I'm doing structured finance. Okay, cool. That's great. Don't only do structured finance. I hope you're doing some M&A or something else, adjacent to what you're doing. So I think it actually ends up being a little bit dangerous when you're too narrow too soon. And I'm always so grateful that, I was in law firms for 2 years, and then I was in house. I had a chance to do 100 different things, right? I was there as an M&A lawyer who then I did hundreds and hundreds of commercial deals. Then it was, well, hey, can you do government affairs? Then it was, hey, can you figure out legal tech and legal ops for our company? Because everything was very manual in the aughts. I'm dating myself, but like that is what it was back in those days. And those are amazing things. And part of it's not only you're doing different types of work, but what kind of exposure do you have outside of the United States, right? And so the example is a long time ago. I have a son who's 19 now, and he was 7 months old, and my company said, hey, would you go to Singapore for 3 months and cover maternity leave? My wife is ironically, on maternity leave at the same time. And I was like, my flippant answer was, well, sure, fly us business class, put us up in a great apartment middle of the city. Like, we'll do it. Why not? Like, they're not going to say yes to any of this stuff. And the next day it was like, yeah, can you go in 3 weeks? And I was like, maybe.
That gave me the chills. That is so lovely.
That was come home, talk to my wife and say, honey, can we do this? Is this okay? My wife, full credit, she was like, yes, that sounds amazing. Let's go move across the world and miss the New England winter, which was awesome, by the way, and live somewhere completely different, have a completely different life experience, and then manage a small team of lawyers for Asia Pacific. And that also was a different vibe, different feel. And how do you do that? Live somewhere else and have that kind of experience. I can't replicate that, right? Like that opportunity came up at a later point in my career, but by that point I had 2 kids. They're a little older. Someone was near school, and it just wasn't viable. When you have 2 kids and you get one in kindergarten and one in 3rd grade, some people can do it. And it's amazing. It's a lot harder. So when those things come up, when pre-kids, or if you have 1 kid, you're able to do those things, and like, don't pass those opportunities up. So don't get pigeonholed into kind of being super narrow, but also when you have these chances to have these diverse, lowercase d, diverse experiences of any kind to round out you as a person, your experience set, like jump on them, because 10 years from now, whatever it is, it's going to be harder to do it. And so it's just easier when life is not as complex.
I mean, I keep hearing a theme in what you're saying, and it's really this yes and say yes. And, I remember very clearly my first deposition at the firm was in like rural Ohio or something. And I was telling a friend about it, and they're like, oh, you have to go to rural Ohio. And I'm like, no. I get to go to rural Ohio. And I was so happy, and it went great. And I still remember that deposition like it was yesterday. And, it's definitely similar to these, like a global experience or, experience with a deposition or a big deal or a client matter or a GA, whatever, is like you get one and then you get lots. And so like the doors that have opened to you, I can imagine this Singapore experience. How often does it come up? Do you get asked about it? Maybe interviews, anything like that? Like,
yeah, I get asked
with you.
Like I've got asked about that. It's, part of their background. So I asked about that a pretty fair amount of times, because it's not an opportunity most people have had a chance to do. Like if I travel, it's great. Get a chance to travel and do deals in places like China and Europe, Japan, other places. That's great. And it's really wonderful. But a chance to actually go live somewhere and be part of the fabric of the company, but in a totally different way. And that was a pretty large company I was working at that time, early in my career. That was amazing. That was just absolutely unbelievable. To your point, like part of what Zoom has taken away, right? Zoom has given us a lot. Like there's a lot of good things there. But you talked about going to rural Ohio, and like, can't say I'd be dying for that one, but I've gone to a bunch of really random places for like mediations and deal negotiations. And like, yeah, there are a couple of days or a week. And it was cool to see all these different parts of the world and the country that I never otherwise would have experienced. And I think now, that was a lot of it was, call it 2000 to 2015 or so, was a lot of that. Now, so much of that can be done by Zoom, and a lot more can get done. Like there's a lot of value to it, but like you don't build relationships the same way purely over Zoom as you do in person, shaking someone's hand, having a meal with them, and then like maintaining it over Zoom, I think is not that hard at all, but much harder to form it that way, right? And that's why I think you see remote companies, like I was at Vivid Seats, they were Chicago based, but pretty remote. I was in Boston. I'd go out periodically, but I made it a point to go out there more than I needed to, because I wanted to get to know people beyond the Zoom box. And that was really, really important to me. It doesn't mean you can't have a super successful career remotely. I don't want to suggest that, but the level of intentionality you need to show as a person who is working remotely, just by human nature, has to be greater than it is in person in terms of forming, forging, and maintaining relationships.
I mean, I remember that same vintage was the height of patent litigation, and I was at the law
That
firm, and
too.
it was like this idea of the I asked some colleagues how they knew each other, if they worked on a case before. They're like, yeah, we spent 3 weeks in Tyler together in Tyler, Texas. And they're like,
Right.
that chicken fried steak moment of like, just like laughing over whatever it is. It's like you can't replicate it. That actually is a really nice segue to AI, right? So at GCAI, we have one of our leadership principles basically says something to the effect of like, in a post AI world, like being more human, physically showing up in this case matters more. So, from your perspective, you're an early adopter of AI. You've been an advisor, you've been an angel investor in legal tech, involved in the Boston legal scene. How do you see AI changing things?
It's been really dramatic in the last, I don't call it 18 months, and then maybe it's 12 months. I just feel like things change so quickly. The lawyers that I'm working with that are using AI tools are simply a lot more productive than they were before. So it's allowing them to kind of get to answers much more quickly, and it's dramatic. And like, I don't want to pitch for anything, but like, just to be clear, as someone who's been kind of focused on legal ops and building my legal functions over the last decade plus. It's e-billing tools I'm a huge advocate for, contract management tools, board portal, etc. So when we introduced the AI tool, it was with the team goes, all right, David wants us to try another tool. It's another login, it's another headache. And I understand the eye rolling that goes on in the back. That's okay. I get it. Like, these things are really important in terms of a modern, really high functioning legal team, right? Legal is a product. And this is the first time that after a trial, team came to me and said, so we can't live without this. And my head, like on a swivel, I'm like, whoa, can't live without it? I'm like, well, the free trial's over, so you're kind of gonna be. I don't really have budget right now for this. And the response then was, so we'll give up other stuff. What tools can we get rid of? And I said, I had like, it was an aha moment, like some magical epiphany here, but that never happens in my career before. No one ever was this excited about any legal technology ever. It was always, I was dragging people along for the ride because this was the best thing to make us more efficient, faster, smarter, manage our knowledge. And this was the team saying, yes, I'm dragging you along. And now, like, we want to run ahead. We think it's amazing. Like, we'll give up whatever you need us to. And so we found other things to give up. We were crafty and creative, and it's become a daily part of what they all do. And I've managed our GRC compliance function as well, and they adopted the tool. And so it's been amazing to see. And then kind of the follow-up question, though, is that I feel like I've gotten a bunch lately in kind of like local GC dinners and the like, is what does this mean for young lawyer? And I think that's a harder question to answer. And like, because my view is the team is getting more done faster. So I think, is it getting rid of young lawyers' jobs? I don't think so. I think it's raising the bar significantly, and your ability to use AI legal tools well is now going to be table stakes. Your ability to find the right answer and present it well in writing is something that the expectations are simply going to be a lot higher. And then how much you produce is going to be a lot higher, because the questions that you can answer with this, it's just increased speed in terms of contract review, legal research, et cetera. And what I found, the other interesting result was, for a lot of kind of projects I would send to law firms. So the project still exists, but the framing is different. The framing was before, hey, law firm X, I have this project. Can you look into this and give us a series of recommendations? Again, don't give me a 10-page memo. That makes me crazy, but give me something like, clear, easy to read, understandable, and go run this project. And like, hey, let's assume this is a privacy project that take 20 hours, whatever it may be. Now we're doing a lot of that work ourselves, right? And we can get, let's call it 75% of the way to a good answer. And then we're going to the firm and saying, hey, listen, have this project. I think I have a lot of the answers, but can you check this? Is this right? Are we going in the right direction with this? Is this just totally wrong? Whatever it is, tell me what you think here. And what's happened is, typically we're on the right path. Is it always right? No, it's not always right, but it's usually pretty close. And there's often nuances that might be missed because you need that true subject matter expert right there. So that 20 hours becomes 5 hours. And I've watched over the past year as that has impacted legal bills, right? On certain types of matters that lend themselves well to this. I'm seeing the amount of hours we're spending on external counsel for certain things are lower. That said, when you accelerate, you can get more done. You're going to get to more projects and have more questions. So does that mean that the bill to law firm X over the course of a year will be lower? Maybe, maybe not, because I might then have more questions for them because I got more stuff done and there's more things happening. Which is I'm not trying to get around the
I think
answer
it's
of how's it affect your
Jevon's
lawyers?
paradox. Yeah, I mean, it's like Jevon's paradox of and then the example I like to use back to your sports metaphor is that it's like basketball, right? Where so before the 90s, basketball players did not lift weights as a practice. Then they started with basically Michael Jordan and his coach, and now everyone's bulkier, more aggressive. But, it's adversarial system and business. Of course, you got to move fast. You got to get more things done. Maybe you're opening up more countries. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it's sort of this short-term retraction, just exactly as you described. But I think long-term, particularly because you can use it also, these smaller companies, you can launch government affairs, you can redo your privacy policy, you can challenge more things with this. So I think you're right. I don't think the net is going to go down.
I think you're getting more shots up, right? Again, back to the basketball analogy.
Exactly.
Hey, basketball games in the NBA 30 years ago were teams would score 95 to 100 points. Now they're scoring 120 points a game. You're getting more shots up. And that's sort of what AI is doing, is accelerating it. You're more accurate. You're getting more shots up. And that, if you're getting more shots up and then you're spending, you have more questions for the firm, ultimately it may net out to the same, but the law firms also need to come along for this ride. As I talk to my friends at law firms, some law firms are kind of AI forward, have their own software devs in-house. They're demoing AI tools and trying to plug in their knowledge bases into it. And other firms are completely afraid of this. And someone very kind of a smaller risk-averse firm, someone I was having dinner with, was kind of asking about it and said, yeah, the firm, the management are really kind of concerned what this is going to mean for the business and the clients. So we're not really adopting it. I was like, okay. I'm like, do you want to be here in 5 years? Because if you don't,
it's a choice.
I'm telling you,
It's a
your
choice.
Your choice is not if we do it. Your choice is either you're going to, or you're effectively not going to be here. So I'm not saying I'm someone I work with, not going to fire them or anything, but the reality is the future looks a lot different if you're not doing it. And there's a lot of, the issues with AI, there's lots of things to discuss that we certainly don't have time for. And I would profess to be the expert on, but the world is going, you're going to have to find a way to come to Jesus and come along with it in a way that you feel is comfortable for your own risk tolerance.
I think that's exactly right. So in moving fast and also being responsible. So I'm homing in on your head on a swivel comment of your team being we got to live with this tool. So is that you and your encouragement that you're okay, we're gonna get on board. As a GC, maybe I've got a bigger team, maybe I've got a global team, I've got a mix of folks at different levels of attraction to AI. How do I do it? Do you throw people into the pool? Do you give them the tool? What do you physically do?
So
to get on board fast?
I think having that free demo and kind of saying, hey, I need everyone to sign up and I need you to try this a couple of times, right? You have a legal research question, you have a contract red line, whatever the right use case is for you, plug it in, try this a couple of times. I'm not making you do this, but I'm telling you, I need you to give it a good faith, the old college try, as they say, right? That was more than enough. I think I had a team that was more forward-leaning than most, but I wouldn't have described everyone as forward-leaning. And I found that once a couple people kind of got into and it got used to it and became part of their routine, everyone else saw, right? It became evident to everyone. And and not everyone's in the same places. Lots of remote people in different locations. They understood what was happening. And it was sort of obvious, and it didn't require them to be the best at AI prompts. You could you throw a word salad in there, and as long as you gave enough information, it'll kind of work, and then you get better at it, prompting classes, et cetera, over time. I genuinely, this was the easiest tool that I've ever had adopted by my legal team. I know,
no, that's flattering.
Because
yeah, and I mean, it led you to invest. So I'm flattered. So full disclosure, David is in fact a small investor in GCI, but that was after his team had adopted
many
it.
months after,
long after. So,
but having rolled out in multiple companies, electronic billing. By the way, everyone hates it. They don't like it. It's not easy to use. Those tools have gotten much, much better, but no one likes it. And I had to like basically mandate it in like iron fist style. And that's not how I like to operate. I like to inspire and say, we should do this, try it out. And then if you don't, you have to, I'm going to kind of come down at that point. Contract management tools, again, people don't love those either, but like they're a necessary evil. This was different. It's the first time I didn't have to always start with carrots, right? Like you always want to start with carrots until you have to get to a stick. The stick's somewhere in the back of the car. I don't know. That's sticks in the trunk, I guess. Sticks in the trunk. I don't know. I lost it.
Good. No, it's great. I love it. Well, this has been so much fun. Let's do some lightning round. All right. Book, podcast, or concept that has influenced you and how you lead. We like to put these in the show notes.
Book, podcast. So books. It's funny. Like I feel so much as podcasts right now, but my podcast diet I think these days is much lighter. Like, I think one thing I like is Everyday AI, like legal podcast. That's actually really good for me for learning purposes. I find that to be great. Masters of Scale, Plain English. Those are all business, like others are business podcasts, but I feel like I learn a lot listening to them. And I think that's also for the young lawyers, like, are you deep in business? Like you have to get deep in business if you're trying to progress in your career beyond your specialty. And then once you get past that, then if you're commuting and like, I just want my junk music, your junk food, which is the ringer for me, right? That's just like pop culture and sports and all that stuff. But books, I love. So Tom Friedman, Frank Herbert, Michael Lewis, kind of big picture thinkers. Tom Friedman, kind of like geopolitics. Frank Herbert, science fiction, author of Dune, which 99% of people who listen to this podcast will not know what I'm talking about, but that's great. And Michael Lewis, Liar's Poker, and like kind of Wall Street, and again, social concepts. I tend to think of things in these big picture moments and then figure out the systems that help run them and understand what are those systems that guide these big concepts and how can I be helpful in guiding inside of those structures.
Love it. David, if someone listened to just this conversation to understand how you operate, what's a principle or mindset you'd want them to take away?
All right. So legal isn't the department of no, it's the department of how. That's how I think about it. Like that's how do we get this done? How do I achieve the goal of the company? And that's how I think of like reframing the traditional understanding of kind of legal function from people who may be skeptics. And those aren't usually your executives, but that's usually actually more junior people in other departments, which I think people needs to think about because those are the people who often the lawyers on your team are dealing with day to day. And you need to convert those folks. When you want to go have success, product, sales, wherever it might be, they need to understand what you do because they're there doing their job. It's not their job to understand what you do. But when you can kind of give a little color and context and show we're all on the same team, it goes an incredibly long way for the company and for you, like for everyone, for your own individual.
I love that. So we've got Department of How and we, not they. We're all a team. This is it's gold. So thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
You've given us a master class in how legal can be product driven, globally minded, deeply connected. We got sports metaphors in there. This is a lot of fun. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more?
LinkedIn, easy. That's the easiest place to find me. I'm not on Twitter much these days, but LinkedIn, I tend to post a pretty fair amount.
Good stuff. We'll see you there.
Thanks so much.
That was my conversation with David Morris, a general counsel, advisor, investing, and someone really that I can look up to around how legal teams can create impact. If you're thinking about how to elevate your legal function, whether through hiring, frameworks, showing up in real life as a great business partner, I hope this episode gave you something to bring back to your team. Follow CZ and Friends wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our newsletter at gc.ai/newsletter or check us out at gc.ai for more conversations, behind the scenes tools, and takeaways for legal and business leaders. Thanks for listening.